On today's podcast, we're talking about dealing with ice breaking and setting impressions and all that stuff, and how our childhood has influenced how the strategies that we use to communicate with the world. You were talking to me today earlier before the podcast about how your childhood was influencing how you uh, talk to new people and all the things that you learned in Limitless. You want to just run away with it and we'll kind of riff back and forth?
hmm Yeah, yeah. I think what I was sharing with you before the podcast was that um, I very quickly learned to be kind of a social chameleon in the sense that I learned to be different with different people. I think that everyone learns that to a certain extent, and the most obvious is that I was extremely different with both of my parents. My mom was very nice, sweet, very, let's say, anxious attached. She needed to have like a lot of presence. So with her, I learned to be more sensitive and more, you know, nice and more like a the boy. Whereas with my dad, who was taking me a lot to soccer and we are sharing more of this kind of, uh, obviously dad child, like dad boy dynamic, I was a lot more direct. I learned to be a lot more confident, to express myself more, to be more assertive. And I was very different in these two scenarios. And that's just an example of how I learned to be really different based on everyone that I knew, because it was very advantageous. Like I learned that if I behaved in the, let's say, the right way, we had a better connection, and then probably I would get something from it, or be happier, or uh, it would just be more efficient. And I think we learn that, and it makes sense because when we're kids, we don't know ourselves, so we act with mimicking what other people do want, and we kind of learn to display the behaviors that are the most favorable to us, which for most of us is actually to, let's say, be a little bit how others want us to be, right? Or at least be common or share something similar with them. I think that's a really fantastic strategies with people that you know and that you love and that you're really close with because you know them so well. But it's a really bad strategy when you have to meet strangers and when you grow up and then you have to start to open up and network and meet women and all that stuff. It's a really poor strategy because you're trying to display what's important to the other person to see when you don't know the other person. So I was saying that this very quickly when I got into that frame, when I got into that new setup of having to interact with people I didn't know, and we all realized that the first day we go to, I don't know, a high school and it's a new school and we don't know anyone, or we go to uni, or we just show up in a new place for a new sport and we don't know anyone. Most of the time we're like, or at least, when we're young, we're like, okay, I'm just going to wait until something happens and then maybe I'll see. And if we wait to see enough, then we start to understand how people kind of interact together. And most of us will just go with the trend, we'll just adapt. But that doesn't really work when you want to meet people one on one that are new. That's, I think, one of the main reasons why people really struggle with first impressions, with breaking the ice. Um, what do you think of that? How was it like similar for you?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to go into a big psychology thing about it, but I mean, we learn by modeling because our cognitive abilities don't show up until we're 12. So, like, the only way we could learn how to get what we want and be social and interactive is by watching other people interact, testing things against them, and seeing how it comes back, like fire and
Mhm.
response. So, it's not like we could have thought when we were 7 years old, well, why is what I'm saying affecting them emotionally, and what
Yes.
conclusions are they jumping to? We can't do that shit. Like we don't have the structures in our brain yet. So, I mean, it's natural that everybody learns to be chameleons, which is why attachment issues show up, right? Because
Yes.
there's no way to clear it up, But I think that I guess the point you're trying to make is that getting away from being a chameleon, pinging off of other people, and trying to um, deliver what you think that they want is a poor strategy. And I would disagree because all of our communication is based on our own assumptions, right? Like, I'll give you an example that may clear it up in my brain, so maybe it'll clear it up in yours. My mother was super anxiously attached, and she sort of substituted my love for the love of her lovers and stuff. And so she was constantly trying to to get me to behave in the way that she would have to be ideal, right? And from a very young age to all through my teenage years, she was constantly trying to. She wasn't trying to make me a better person or have me give me a better life or make me moral or whatever. She was trying to make me in the image of what she wanted to that she thought was her ideal.
See.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um and I became super hyper vigilant. Like my entire childhood was trying to figure out what this woman wanted and trying to meet her needs before she asked, because if she had to ask, I wasn't a good communicator. Like
Hmm.
if she had to repeat herself, if she had to ask, whatever. And I find that same shit happened my entire life. All of my relationships, they say you date your parents or whatever. Like even my current girlfriend, I have a little tinge of that, like where I'm like trying to figure out what she's gonna need, try to meet her needs in advance, and then when I fail, I feel badly, right? I've got much more emotional regulation now, after studying all this stuff and whatever, but it's still kind of like baked in at the core. It's what I learned in my attachment stuff, and um there's one side of the camp that's like, okay, I went to a workshop where they're just like, just be yourself and radical honesty and just say the first thing that comes to mind and totally just show up as you and impress the world with your being. And I did that shit for a while and I studied all that stuff and I trained with some of the great coaches in the industry who that's their core material, right? But I come from this idea, from all the stuff I've seen, that all communication is manipulation. And while manipulation may have a bad connotation, we're always trying to manipulate something in somebody else's mind when we're communicating. That's the purpose of communication. Trying to lead them down a certain path. We're trying to let them see what we see from the world that we see. And the error, I think, is assuming we're right and not calibrating. Like, there are many times where I try to assess my girlfriend's mood, try to figure out what she's going to need and want, and then try to deliver it in advance. And then I was wrong,
Yeah.
right? Then the only injury was that I thought I was right. Like I was so sure that I knew what I was doing, and I placed my ego in the moment, or I placed my self esteem in the moment based on me thinking that I correctly evaluated the situation, right? Uh, and to your point, you come up with strangers, and we have all of these egoic structures in our brains that are like, okay, well, I've talked to guys just like you 1,000 times, and so I know exactly what you're thinking, and that is false, right?
Yes.
But there's a certain uh the skill of social skills, right? Like the soft skills are actually being able to quickly categorize, create hierarchies, and speak in a way that you think is going to land well and calibrate quickly, right?
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
problem is when we think that we're right and we don't calibrate. When our ego says, I assume that I know what you are, and then you show me evidence the otherwise and I don't see it or I ignore it. And I continue to communicate in a way that isn't uh, what we were talking about in the last podcast,
Just yeah.
handshaking, like finding our levels, right? Because
Yes.
all communication is me trying to figure out what you want and pull uh, my impression well and and understand you correctly, make you feel understood or make you feel, rapport or whatever. We're always trying to chameleon or ping. However,
Yes.
if you're only pinging and chameleoning and you're not trying to find yourself and throw it into the void, then you create a hierarchy problem right away. Which is
Hmm.
like, okay, you're try hard, or you're too desperate or too needy or too whatever, because they can feel you trying to seek out what they're trying to what they want to hear. And that's disingenuous because they can't figure out who you are. And so many of the guys that I've coached, their problem was not that they couldn't manipulate or be a chameleon or even that was a bad strategy. It's that when the other person wanted to probe and see who you really were, they didn't have anything to give them.
Mhm.
And that's my problem too. When I'm trying to manipulate a situation and do all the impression management is because I'm not in the moment testing to see how what I'm saying is coming across, what being
Yeah.
aware of their emotions, trying to be acutely aware of like how they feel and what their responses are saying about them. I'm not in the moment. I'm just sitting there trying to manage some sort of package out into the world. And I don't think that that's inherently bad, but it has to be coupled with the feedback right away of the person's micro expressions and all that stuff. Um, it might have got complicated, but that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, especially the making assumption. I think it's eventually leads to the same type of conclusion. Yesterday, I was actually coaching one of my clients, and one of his problems that we saw in person is that he thinks he's highly empathetic. He thinks he knows what people are feeling immediately, and he kind of brushes off the validation, or let's say the checking in with people. So let's say you would share something with him, and he would immediately say, "Oh yeah, this is how I would feel in this situation. This is it. What's next?" And he doesn't really make the time to check and, like, let's say, understand, appreciate the world of the other person to see if that's actually accurate. And so in real life, he comes off as you don't give a shit about me, or maybe you're trying to be caring, but like you're really not. You're not hearing me. You don't see me. There's something off. There's no. So essentially, what you're saying is, or what I got from that is communication is sharing of information. Sharing means two things. It's sending and receiving. There has to be both. If you're doing
Mm-hmm.
only one or the other, this is not communication, right? So these two elements have to be in place. When you're assuming, and I'm going to go back to my example, which is through learning to calibrate and adapt to other people, I learned to make very strong assumptions about what I thought other people would want from me. Those are 90% of the time wrong. Therefore, every time I meet a new person and I stay in that frame, and if I don't evolve out of it, which is what you were saying, and learn how to basically kind of be yourself at the baseline. I don't like the word be yourself, but let's say decide how you want to present yourself to kind of send a first, let's say, attempt to communicate and then calibrate, meaning first attempt to make a connection from wherever place you are, then understand and get a little bit of a let's say a grasp, a deeper grasp of the other person, so that you can communicate in the way they need to receive the information. If you don't evolve your strategy to be like that, and you still rely on, okay, I'm gonna be the person that knows everything. I know how other people want to see me. They want to see me confident, charismatic, all that stuff. You're missing on the human factor of, well, I actually don't know. I actually don't know what they want, and it's up to me and them to figure it out. That's where communication actually happens. I think that's how I see it from my perspective. So the strategy is, when you don't have, as you said, the neurological abilities to think for yourself, adapt and calibrate, and give something of your own, when the only thing you can do is literally mirror people and learn to behave this way. Even though kids are still like, I think kids are still extremely good at just not really giving a fuck, like doing what they want, and then they respond really quickly and adapt. I think they're actually quite efficient at that already. I would like to, I mean, maybe we can talk about that later. But it's a poor strategy to assume that you know what the other person wants to see, because you will assume that they want to see something perfect, which is probably not that. And it's a much better strategy to go uh, attempt to meet and share, meet the person in their world, try to show a little bit of yours, try to understand a little bit of theirs, and try to find how you can really communicate together in the best way. Um, it's a much better strategy than assumptions, than um, adapting all the time, especially when you don't know what the other person needs. These are, like, let's say, more evolved strategies. Uh, None of them are bad. There's just strategies that apply better to certain situations.
Yeah, well, I mean, it comes down to the major point that I usually have is like life is messy, and most of efficacy or expertise really comes to being able to calibrate in the moment, right? Um, I've been through so many like sales trainings and dealt with marketers and whatever. I used to work on this development team, and every month we'd hire a new SEO agency or marketing agency, right? Somebody who's supposed to go out and get 1 million views to our website and get us more sales or whatever. And there were the new guys, you could tell, because they're the new guys who didn't believe a damn word they were saying. They were reading off of a script, and they got this like really false showman way of saying, well, I brought up a whole bunch of Excel spreadsheets, and we're just gonna have to go through them. It's too much to go through right now. I'll be happy to email you and and like shut the fuck up, dude. Answer my question, right? Like, that like he's just blowing smoke. And then there were other guys who took the yeah, we got this handled. You probably wouldn't understand. It would probably go over your head. So let's just say that we upped it by about 22% this month, right? And you're like, shut up, dude. I asked for the numbers. Fucking just humor me, And all of these guys were committed. And then there are the people who kept it real. They'd be like, yeah, so these numbers do that numbers do this, and we didn't see any growth here, but I think it's because of this, this, and this, and we're tweaking that. So I can update you in a couple weeks, and it'll take about 2 weeks in my experience for this metric to kind of follow up. So anyway, right, and like that guy, even if he didn't know, the answer wasn't good, wasn't going to make me happy. He was so real about it, and he talked off the top of his head and told you his thoughts and told you what he was going to do to fix it. Like, he was just there communicating, right? And he wasn't unconfident because he was showing that he didn't know something at the time, but he wasn't confident either. He wasn't overconfident either. He was just there. And for me, that, we call it the real, is one of the best ways to interact with people, because it's like, hey, you're human, I'm human, we probably have a similar goal, let's track and figure out how we go. However, when you build social skills, when you're a good public speaker, it's not about not saying it's not about being super concise and pronouncing your words correctly and all that stuff, even though when you're a good public speaker you do all that stuff. But if you do all that stuff and check all the boxes, you're still not necessarily going to create an impact in the crowd, right? Same thing with pickup, same thing talking to women. Like, there is a skill set, and you can manipulate, and you can put an impression forth that's going to be better than the other one. We tell the guys to show up, to take a shower, and wear decent clothes, and speak loudly, and change our vocal tonality, right? Because if we don't, our results are going to go in a different way than we wanted to. And I think that that's all okay and totally natural for us to do. The reason that we have different hierarchies of communication is because some guys don't work on it and some people do. Some people had sisters and understand how women talk, and some people don't, right? There's definitely a skill set, and we're always pinging. We're always being charismatic and communicating, We're always trying to appear charismatic when we're communicating. And when we do the wrong things for a particular scenario, and we do that scenario a bunch of times, if I stand on stage and I'm like, hey guys, so I have this this concept I want to talk to you. You guys might not get it. But anyway, I'm just gonna say it. So that's not going to inspire people in the audience as a general rule. I'm not going to get across what I'm trying to get across. And so I'm going to do the things like, hey guys, I got a concept I got to tell you guys today. You might not get it, but I'm going to take a chance, try to explain it properly, because it might just change your life, right? It's the tactic is sort of showmanship. It's sort of like being on stage, being a performer, but there's a try hard, unreal, uncanny valley way to do it, and then there's a way that still connects with your inner core, and you have to have both.
Funny how you said we're always trying to be charismatic, because that was one of the words that we analyzed the roots when I studied Latin a little bit, and it comes from, I don't remember the words exactly, but it comes from like to favor.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the charismatic is being favored. And so we're always trying to get something from an interaction or from people. That is true.
Yeah.
And that's where I think all this comes from, both the anxieties and the abilities to be really performing and the need to influence. I don't know if we need to call it manipulation, but it's definitely to influence. Anyone who wants to, well, go somewhere and be a leader in any way, that's essentially what it is. A leader is the person that can change the thoughts, the emotions, and the actions, the behaviors of someone. That's what it is. Otherwise, you're nothing. You're pretending, right? So someone that can make a change is someone that has this ability to be charismatic, and therefore, like, all these tools kind of come together. I think what would be really helpful is if we kind of made a list of, like, let's say, important concepts and words, and we started to break them down a little bit more specifically. Like, this is there's a lot of, like, things that we're touching on this podcast that are really interesting. Yeah, and I think it would make sense to kind of break them down in a certain way. For example, when you say communication, just that simple fact of understanding that communication goes two ways is something that most people struggle with. Like, some people think that, like, streaming data is communicating. That's not really communication. It's streaming data. That when you're watching TV, it's not communication. It's a communication channel, and they're streaming data from there. But that's like influencing display of, or influencing streaming of data. I don't know how to say it better than that. It is not
I
communication.
would
There's
say
no back and forth.
it's absolutely a one-way communication. But
Yeah.
so, like, if we're gonna get nerdy about it, okay, a TV with nobody in the room to see it is not communicating. A TV with somebody seeing it is communicating to the person sitting there.
Mhm.
Bidirectional communication would be if we could talk to the people on screen, right? Like you and I are doing right now.
Yes.
But I think there are definitely, like Trump, right? He'll get on stage and he'll talk, and he's not talking to anybody in particular, and he's still being a powerful communicator, and he's influencing for sure, right? So I don't think communication has to be two ways, but it does have to be sent and received,
Yeah.
right? And obviously, to your point, two-way communication, building rapport with people in real time, with feedback, is a different style of communication than standing on stage or standing in front of a camera or all that stuff. But it's still communication, I think.
Yes.
You're still attempting to
Yeah.
influence somebody on the other end, and the other person has to be on the other end to be influenced.
Yes.
Right? Um,
Agreed.
but I think that's why, and I don't have any science to back this up at the moment, but I think that's why most people have problems getting on stage. It's because we learned all of our communication trying to ping off whatever people are trying to tell us, right? And they say public speaking is like worse than death, right? And then when we get on stage and we don't have, that's why some of the things are like, oh, focus on one person and speak to them in the room because it creates, that kind of thing. It's because we don't know how to be when we can't
Get
see the
feedback.
audience's reactions and feedback.
Yes.
Which is why public speaking is such a great transformative thing. I mean, speech class in university changed my life. Like, just I was having like nausea and freezing in the parking lot outside of speech class, like my second year in school, because I did not want to go to speech class, and I was very viscerally feeling I don't want to stand in front of people and talk and da, da, da. And they walked us through all the stuff and the formats and how people get up there, they look try hard, people get really influential, but nobody's listening, and we get to see all of this stuff, and it revolutionized how I communicate with the world because I had to basically be confident in how I was coming across without feedback. It was just the faces of the people who were sitting in front of me, and when the lights are on you, you can't really see them that well, and you don't know what they're thinking anyway, because they're there for class or they're there in the gymnasium for this speech tournament or whatever, and they're supposed to sit there, be respectful, and listen, right? So you don't even know if they're thinking this guy's an idiot. Like, you don't know that, and so you have to basically assume a stance from where to speak, and then speak with you being
Yes.
there fully, and then hope it lands. But then you do enough of those, you'll be able to read the audience, right? There's levels to it. So I don't know. I think that um, like you were saying in the original conversation we were having, one of the guys one of our biggest problem, one of my biggest problems is we said we were going to be teachers on this one. One of my biggest problems is when I don't know how the people are going to react in front of me. I
Mhm.
have to find it within myself to communicate outwards. And
Yes.
that's why bad sales happens, right? Like I can sell Limitless workshops all day because I fully believe in those products. And whether or not you standing in front of me believes in it, that doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you. And I'm going to handle your objections and stuff because I'm fully invested in this stuff. You ask me to sell something I don't believe in, now I'm trying to figure out, oh, does he believe me and all that?
Mhm.
There's no me in it. There's nothing I can bring to the table and give outwards. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So you have to have both. You have to have your ability to check in with yourself and convey from you, but you also have the ability to quickly see what's going on in the other person's micro expressions and face and vocal tonality, read the room, right? And still make choices on how to communicate that aren't just you blathering whatever's on your brain out into the world, right? Like you have to have both in order to be a effective influencer.
Yeah. So completely like it seems unrelated, but I have a little story. In ancient Greece, they were actors, and when they were playing acts in ancient Greece, it was always the actors, and they were putting masks on. That was the entire point of how theater started, right? And what's funny in these is that these masks always always have three holes. No pun intended here, but it you see the eyes and you see the mouth. Because I mean, you can put any role you want, any mask you want, but the actor behind, meaning what they display through the eyes and through their voice, is always consistent. It's always the same. Actors nowadays have the same thing. Sometimes you go see a movie and you know that a certain actor that you like is going to play. He has a certain role, but he doesn't change himself all entirely. He still has something that is him, and then he plays a certain role. In Greece, they were playing that, and they were probably not that good at imitating other people at that point, I imagine. So, what would always stand out as this is an actor that I like is not the mask that he was putting on, which was he could change that at any second, and everybody would understand that it's part of the play. But it's the voice and the energy coming behind. So most people really try to take a lot of time to choose the right mask to put on without ever thinking what kind of voice and what kind of, let's say, gaze, what kind of eyes I want to create behind. They don't take the time to create, to really dig in and decide. That's what you said. How do I want to be perceived? How do I want to be known to myself? How do I want to be known to other people? They don't really take the time to design that thing, which obviously at some point has to be congruent, with themselves. Like if I'm someone that is hyper calm and then I want to be known as someone hyper extravagant, like people will just see that, like you were saying with these sales guys, something is just off, right? It has to be somehow okay or in congruence with our personalities. But most people don't take the time to design this background that people always feel in the back end. They just constantly try to change the mask, which is fine. We always will put the masks on, but it's in most cases it's much more effective to, and that's what actors do. Actors define really how they want to be perceived, like as they are, and then they just take on the play. Like someone like Schwarzenegger or whatever, when he was playing, dude, it was kind of always the same person that you would see because he has created a persona for himself. A persona literally means how, like, known through your voice. He has created a voice for himself, a certain person, a certain stature, a certain pose that he would have, and then he would just play different roles with that. Most of us, I mean, myself included, for a long time, we haven't thought about, okay, how do we want to be known in this world as we are? And then we just take different roles because you can be a boyfriend, you can be a husband, you can be a teacher, you can be a worker, you can be a friend, you can be all these different roles with still having some of you in the background.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
talking with one of my clients this week, and he was having a big problem. I'm trying to get him through the shift of like it's not the tactics, it's not the techniques, it's you conveying who you are, right? And he's been taking so long to get to this point because he got so many results from basically copying all the great seducers.
Mhm.
He read all of Robert Greene's
Yes.
books, and he, in the beginning of the dating workshops, he would write down all the lines, he'd practice them in the mirror, and he'd become a very good mask wearer, right? And when it came to it, he doesn't know what he wants. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know how he wants to interact with the world. He doesn't know what he wants to give. He's a war vet and he's got PTSD and there's all this stuff going on. But he basically put his whole social development on hold until he got out of the military. And
Yes.
at 30 something years old now, he doesn't even know what it's like to relate to people, right? And I was trying to explain to him, like, look, you have to pace and lead. You have to be fun, get a vibe going, and then you can share parts of yourself, dig parts about her, and figure out what you guys can connect. But you can't just open with like common connection questions because it's too weird. You have to go be fun first. He's like, "How do I be fun?" And I was like, "Okay, well, what's fun for you?" And we did this whole thing, and he legitimately doesn't know how to be fun unless somebody else told him it was fun,
That is fun. Okay. Yeah.
right? Like he's like, okay, if I'm gonna be fun, I'm gonna tell this joke and then I'm gonna laugh, and then if she doesn't laugh back, I don't know what to do,
Yes.
right? I'm like, no, you got to be
Yeah.
self-amused, and he's like, what does that mean? And I was like, seriously? And basically, I was like, all right, what do you laugh at when you're by yourself? He's like, I don't really do that. And I'm like, oh shit, like this is the problem, right? You can't bring the fun you out because you don't even know what it is. And
Yes.
then
And you don't feel it. You don't know what it is. Yeah. It's like people that say that they value something, like they are big on, I don't know, love, but they don't know how love feels for them.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean. I had a client like this. He was a so funny thing about this guy is that he has autism. So these people are really interesting to work
that
with
is funny.
because what
Oh.
when you give them something to execute, they will execute, right? Like if they see a clear way of executing something and repeating something, they will do it. So it's like a really perfect way to see and test how strategies work. And he had the same problem. Like he said, I would like to be more fun. I was like, okay, well, what is fun to you? Exactly as you said. And he was like, I don't know. And so we had this exercise. It was on a group call where he was kind of supposed to like show us how it is for him when he has fun, where he is in fun. He was just incapable of doing it. So after that, like he understood, okay, I don't even know how fun feels anymore. Okay, only exercise, repeat as much as you can. I'm fun. And try to connect it progressively to like let your brain just do the connections to make you experience fun. So this guy really took it seriously. Every time he would drive his car for at least, I think it was 1 hour there, 1 hour back for work, all the way for 1 hour, so 2 hours every day, he would repeat, I'm fun, I'm fun, I am fun, I am fun, in different ways. And at some point, after a few days, he connected it to some memories he had. He started to feel it in his body and he started to laugh. Like he told me he was laughing alone in the car because he felt fun, how
right.
it is, how it feels. He was like, okay, I know what fun is for me right now. That's great. So I'm fun in this way. This is my way of being fun. It's not just a word that I heard and that I'm going to display. It's my way of being fun. I think that's really where it comes down to, as we said, is like define how you want to be known, define a few qualities, how you want to be known, and then find how yourself will adjust to that. Like if I want to be caring, caring has millions of different versions. Many people want to be caring. I don't know. Like let's take something that maybe will like hit better with guys, but I want to be perceived as powerful. Power has a lot of different variations.
Yeah.
And if you're just trying to imitate someone's power, it will most likely not be yours. So it's okay, I want power, and now it's my quest or my journey to find how I am powerful.
Right.
That's already a great assumption. So yeah, this is again something that I think could take an hour of conversations. So I'm not going to get deeper into
Yeah,
that.
let's
But that
talk
was a
about into displaying power on the next one.
sure.
That'll be
Okay.
fun. That'll be fun. Yeah. Uh,
Let's wrap up.
yeah, let's wrap it up.
Yeah,
Your turn.
done.
Awesome.
was
Well, thanks guys for listening to our ramblings. We're going to continue to do this off to the end of 2024 at least. So if you're not subscribed to the podcast, please do on iTunes. It helps us out. And we're also on Spotify on the video podcast and the YouTube and all of the social medias and stuff. So wherever you follow, please follow us and interact with us, and we'll be happy to field your questions and deal with stuff. If you're looking for a community of guys who are studying these influences, concepts, and doing real time stuff with group calls and all that stuff. We have a course in the school community. The link is in the show notes. So please join up there. It's free. We'll obviously try to sell you live events and stuff later on, but for now, join us as we continue this movement in limitless influencing the world.
most importantly, you can ask your questions over there, and then we'll speak about more specific topics than what we're doing right now, because we're just like finding our voices in this space. So
Awesome. Well, I brought this for all of you who are on video, and all of you on audio will never know what I just did.